Hi, and welcome to Loving Out Loud, Learning to Love in a Hate-Filled World, the video series, Chapter 14. The title of this particular episode is Angel in 22D. So maybe I might get a little out there this particular week, but hopefully you'll get something really good out of this message. So here we go, Angel in 22D. Theme scriptures for this week. First one is from 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 5. It says, basically, love is not self-seeking. That one ought to get us all right between the eyes, right? Love is not self-seeking. If there's anything we seem to struggle with, particularly in the Western world, in the United States specifically, is self. We are preoccupied with ourselves. So that's the first scripture. The second one is, as Jesus approached Jericho, a blind man was sitting by the roadside begging. When he heard the crowd going by, he asked what was happening. They told him, Jesus of Nazareth is passing by. He called out, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. Those who led the way rebuked him and told him to be quiet. But he shouted all the more, Son of David, have mercy on me. Jesus stopped and ordered the man to be brought to him. When he came near, Jesus asked him, what do you want me to do for you? Lord, I want to see, he replied. Jesus said, receive your sight. Your faith has healed you. That story is found in Luke chapter 18, verses 35 to 42. It's an interesting story. Jesus is on a trip. Of course, he spent about 3 years traveling around, but he was on his way to Jericho. He had an entourage going with him, people around him, people knew who he was, and he was focused on trying to get to Jericho. And all of a sudden, out of the blue, here's this guy yelling his name, yelling for him to come and stop and help and take the time off of his trip to pay attention to whatever his need was at that particular moment. That was going on. The story in this episode, for me, this rings very true, or very real, maybe is a better way to put it. Before I get to that story, though, I need to tell you a little bit about myself. Maybe watching these videos you can't really tell it, but I seem to have a face that people like to talk to. This has happened to me for years and years and years. I go to a restaurant, and if I eat there more than once, all of a sudden I know everyone there. I know where they're from. I know what they do. I know where they went to college. I know what their aspirations are. And sometimes I know what their personal lives are about. Sometimes these things happen in one sitting. There was a Chinese restaurant on the northeast side of Indianapolis that I started eating in there about once a week. And before you knew it, I knew that the mom and dad owned the restaurant. The primary server was a young woman. She actually had an mechanical engineering degree from Virginia Tech, and she was serving in the restaurant so her brother could go on and go to college, and this was the whole family dynamic. These are the things I learned just by opening my ears and listening and paying a little bit of attention, and people seem to be comfortable in telling me things. It's happened at checkouts. It's happened in all sorts of different situations. There was a guy on an airplane once. I had a business trip to Albany, New York. Actually, I think it was to Albany or to Bennington, Vermont. But basically, I came through the Albany airport, and I had to do a connector in Detroit. When we got on the plane in Detroit, I'm seated with this guy next to me. He started talking to me while we were just pulling out of the gate and taxiing to take off. He stopped talking to me as we were walking off the plane through the jet bridge in the Indianapolis terminal. And I found out why he was coming to Indianapolis. I found out that he was getting a divorce. I found out that he was getting a divorce because he had been struggling with an addiction to porn, but also because he had invited his best friend to come and stay with him and his wife at their home, and because the guy needed a place to stay, and the guy ended up having an affair with his wife, and he blamed all of his troubles on his dad in Indiana, and that's why he was coming to Indiana. And he's dumping all of this on me on the airplane, and I'm doing what I can to try to help him. Sometimes you got to wonder, what in the world do you say in a case like that? But maybe all he really needed was someone to listen to him. I did what I could. I shared what I could. I even tried to reach out to him afterwards. He gave me his email address, but when I did reach out, he didn't respond. But here's the deal. People seem to be willing and able, oftentimes, to talk to me. And I've come to expect it. It's happened so often that I kind of expect that it's going to happen in almost any and every situation, but particularly when I'm in places like airports and restaurants. But I've come to expect it. But here's the thing. Sometimes I don't want to talk. Sometimes I want to relax and do what I want to do. I have my own agenda. I have what I would like to get done. You know, kind of like Jesus was on his way to Jericho. That was his agenda. He was on his way there. Sometimes, I have my own thing, and I don't want to talk to someone else. Or sometimes I just want to sit back and enjoy a little bit of time with my wife. Recently, my wife and I took a trip. Well, I shouldn't say recently. When I was looking this up and pulling the pictures, it was actually quite a long time ago, 10 years or so. We were on a trip to Denver, Colorado. We took a long weekend. We spent time with our best friends near Parker, Colorado. We flew out there, had a magnificent time. We went to Boulder. We went to Red Rocks and caught a concert by Alison Krauss in Union Station. And we had some great food. We hiked the Garden of the Gods down in Colorado Springs. We ate at this great tea house up in Boulder. We did a lot of stuff in a short window of time, and we had a great time together. And the story picks up in the Denver airport as we're waiting to get on our airplane to fly home. Our trip was coming to an end, and I was relishing the last little bit of time with my wife before we got back and jumped back into whatever was going on in our lives at the time. This is where I'm at. This is where my brain is at. And that's when I met the guy that I'm referring to as the angel in 22D. When we walked up to our gate, there was basically Nancy found a spot facing our gate. We were a little bit early, so she sat down on the end of a row, and there was one open seat next to her, and then on the other side of that was a bunch of guys I can't speak today. A guy had piled a bunch of his stuff on the next seat, and he was on the next seat after that, seat number 4. So I sat down next to Nancy, next to the guy's stuff, thinking I'm going to, chat with Nancy as we wait for our airplane. But no. The guy whose stuff was next to me began to talk to me. And pretty soon I found out, he'd been a Marine. He was in the military. He's been out of the military. He'd been married and divorced. He divorced her when she got bossy. He had other issues going on. He had these tics. He kept kind of rubbing his face. And, so you pretty quickly, from body language and cadence and the things he's talking about and the way he's talking, I figured out he's got some issues mentally. And at that point, my heart should have gone out to him. but it didn't. I didn't want to talk. I didn't want to talk to him. Even though I know these things happen to me all the time, at that moment in time, I didn't want to talk. So I turned off my body language. So closed myself up, kind of leaned away so I'm facing more toward my wife, and started giving him yes and no answers or replies, trying to not promote the conversation. And then at some point in time, I did what you're going to cringe when I say this, and it's in red on the screen here, but I prayed, please God, don't let him be sitting next to me on the airplane. And as soon as I said it, as soon as I thought it, as soon as I prayed it, I thought, I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have done that. It wasn't 5 minutes later, I found out he's in 22C. No, I'm in 22C, and he's in 22D. Literally right across the aisle, just across the airplane aisle from me. What are the odds? Literally, the seat next to me on my left is taken. That's Nancy. So there's only about roughly 1 in 100 shot that this guy's going to be sitting next to me. But he was. I couldn't believe it. But I wasn't, like Jonah, I wasn't ready to be open-hearted yet. We got on the plane. Nancy sits down, I sit down. He sits down. On the other side of him are a couple of college-age girls. Kind of cute. Obviously would attract his attention a little bit. So part of me is like, oh, good, that's going to get his attention. Where am I at? Where's my heart? And then I thought, well, I'm on Frontier Airlines, and they had little TV screens on the back of the seat, and they gave each of us these little cheap earbuds to use on the airplane so we could listen to whatever show. I really wasn't into that. I had a book, but I knew if I just had a book in front of me, he's going to bug me the whole time. So I put an earbud in his ear. I wasn't really listening to it. Was plugged in, but I wasn't really listening to anything. I just wanted him to think I was listening to something so he wouldn't bug me. I ignored him. I was leaving him to the college girls to deal with. And it worked. He only poked me once or twice. And I had 2.5, 3 hours of relative quiet. Was able to visit with Nancy some, and that worked. But I failed. You get that? I failed. Let me go on. This is why I call him my angel in 22D. Hebrews 13, verse 2. It says, do not forget to show hospitality to strangers, for by doing so, some people have shown hospitality to angels without knowing it. Was he an angel? Oh gosh, beats me. I don't know. I do know that it's a little odd. The coincidence is a little too real, a little bit too much of a coincidence. I do find it interesting that right after I prayed that prayer, I found out he is right next to me. And I'll tell you this, since that day, the number of times that has happened to me has gone down. I don't get that level of ease of conversation with people after that day, almost like one of my talents has been taken. I don't know. I hope that's not true, because I do appreciate the ability to be able to talk to people. It just doesn't feel like a coincidence. Now, could I have spent some time talking to him? Absolutely. Could I have opened my heart and made him feel safe and cared about? Yes, I could have. Could I have taken some of the burden off the girls on the other side? Oh yeah. As a father of young girls, not young girls, they're young women these days, but as a father of young women, I should have thought of that. Did he just need a friendly ear? Maybe. Or maybe it was a test that I failed. I don't know. Would it have been too much to ask of me to sacrifice a little bit of my personal satisfaction on a roughly 3-hour flight home? No. Because you see, love is not self-seeking. I failed. I'll be looking for him in the future. And he might be a young military veteran with some struggles from his post-traumatic stress syndrome, or he might be an older black man on a bench in a park, or he might be a homeless woman struggling to get by, sitting on a sidewalk. But I'll be looking for him. I'll be watching. And hopefully I won't fail the test next time. Here's our discussion questions for this week's class. Can you share about a time when you really needed someone to listen to you? I think we all have those moments, right? Sometimes we don't need anybody to fix it. Sometimes we know the right answers, but sometimes we just need someone to listen. And I think that's over the years, I think that's why so many people have been so willing to talk to me. It's because I exuded this willingness to listen. Okay, second question. If you experienced a time when someone really gave you their ear, how did that make you feel? I keep pushing you to share your feelings. I think that's an important part of internalizing these messages. Number 3, why do you think people avoid taking the time to listen to others? Both people they know and strangers. I think sometimes even, people that we know or maybe even are close to, we don't want to take the time to listen to them. And it's especially true of strangers, I think. Okay, next question. What gift or gifts do you have that could be sent by God to help others around you? God had obviously given me a gift of being able to free people up so they felt like they could talk to me. I hope I haven't failed so badly that he has permanently taken it from me. But what gifts do you have that could be sent by God so that you could help others around you? And then lastly, consider Matthew 25. This is the sheep and the goats, right? This is the place where Jesus is talking about, I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was hungry and you gave me something to eat. I was naked and afraid and you clothed me. I was sick or in prison and you came to visit me. These are people who have something from God that they can share with someone in need. Consider Matthew 25, 14 to 30. What is the danger of not using God's gifts that were meant to benefit others? Stuff to think about, stuff to talk about. All right, time for your weekly challenge. Here we go. Pay attention this week. Excuse me. Pay attention this week to the attributes of your character that can be utilized to help others. Like with me, I have had this attribute. I hope it's not a have had. I hope I still do. But I have had this attribute of creating a sense of freedom to speak in others. But think about your own attributes. What are the attributes of your character that can be utilized to help others? Look for ways this week to use that gift or gifts that God has provided to you to benefit other people. All right? Okay, that takes care of week 14. Next week, week 15, there's only 2 of these left. So week 15, the title is An Unknown Cousin. I don't even know her name, and you'll learn why next week. an unknown cousin, words without life context. Thanks, guys and gals. We'll see you next week.